Hello, Ira Coiner here, President and Founder of Triathlon Partners. Thank you very much for making it to another episode of Triathlon Partners TV. But before we begin, I'd like to wish all my viewers out there, all my fans, all my clients, a very happy and healthy new year, and only the best for everyone in the upcoming year. Now, getting back to business, this episode we'll be talking about RILAs. They are a retirement product I have spoken about before in the past that I think is fantastic for several reasons. And I'll go into a little bit of the reasons. I know I've done that in the past, but what I've also done to help people understand the concepts on why these things are so great, I put together a lot of visuals, right? So hopefully that will help. Now, to start off, we have RILAs, and in the RILAs, you have the different investment options are called segments, right? And these segments are their return is based on the performance of an underlying index, like the S&P 500. So how that S&P 500 performs goes into a sort of formula based on the segment, and it spits out an answer at the end of the year on what the segment's return is. Okay, so we have several segments. We have 4 that we're going to explain today. Now I'm going to share my screen and show you the first one. Share. All right, so the first segment we're just going to call standard segment. And what these RILAs have, and we've talked about it before, they have this buffer, this protection that that you don't lose when the market goes down. So the standard segment we're going to talk about has a 10% buffer, which means the market is down 5% at the end of the year. You don't lose anything. You're flat. The market's down 10%. Again, you're flat. Anything below 10%, you're down, and you're down that minus 10%. So, for example, the market's down 15, you have a 10% buffer, you're only down 5 at the end of the year. So on the graph, when we look at this, the index is the orange line, and the buffer, and the standard segment's performance is the blue line. So we can see, since the blue line, while the market is negative, is still having flat returns. That's what the buffer does. And then, as I said, once we hit that 10%, we start losing money. But you'll actually be down 10% less than the market index, which is great. Now, for this protection, right, and I'm going to say this buffer protection is standard through all the segments in the way that it works. Now, to offset that, what we have is we have a cap. So there's a maximum amount that we're able to gain every year, and that's also based on the index performance. So we're not going to earn more than the cap, which is the terminology they use, and the cap on this particular segment is 16%. So if the market's up 5%, you're up 5%. If you're up 10%, if the market's up 10%, you're up 10%. If the market's up 20%, you're up only 16%. So yes, that cap does disappointing if you go through it, but when we think about the average return on the S&P is about 8 to 9% a year, and you're getting up to 16% while having all this protection, that's a pretty good payoff. That's a nice trade-off, if you will, especially if you're looking to retire. You can't afford to have a 20% down market, right? Because that 20% down market means you got to keep on going to work, which no one wants to do. So, and no one's ever really complained, hey, I only made 16% in the market, I got to work another year. Like, so let's talk about this, that it's fantastic because you're really looking at returns that when you take out these negative returns, overall, you're going to have a much steadier growth in your accounts. All right, so let's go to the next segment, which we call a step-up segment. Now, not going to go over how the buffer works because the buffer works the same exact way. This particular step-up segment has a 15% buffer. So the other one was 10, this is 15, same rules. But what a step-up does is if the market is positive, if the index is positive, you earn the cap, right? So the cap on this structure is 9.5%. The market's up 1%. If it's up 0.1%, you will earn 9.5%. If the market is up 20%, you earn 9.5%. So there's no tiers. If it's up, you get 9.5%, which is great. You can see the blue line here. Anytime you see the blue line above the orange line, means that the segment outperformed the market, right? And you'll have the time period where the market will outperform the segment. But again, 9.5% cap is very good, considering this is also a 15% buffer, right? If the buffer was 10%, this cap would be higher. All right, let's go to another one, very similar to the next one. It's called a dual step up. Now, what a dual step up is that payout, that step up is not just when it's positive. The step up is also when it's negative and it's greater than the buffer. So we could see here, we're making money because of the blue line here, right, at the cap, which is 7.5%, as long as we are above that buffer of 15%. And once we go down 15% or more, we start losing money. But you could see it vastly outperforms on the downside than the index itself, right? The first 15% is covered, whereas if the market was down 15%, the index would be down 15%. You'd lose 15%, but in the RILA, you would be flat. That's great. And the same, no tiers on the top side. You're getting 7.5% no matter how positive it is, right? So what's advantageous about this and the regular step up is if you're looking towards retirement very shortly, and again, you don't want to lose money if the market goes down because you can't afford that, you're also getting a return if it's going down, which helps you hedge against inflation, which is very important, because when you're sitting there going into retirement, you don't necessarily getting returns every year. If you're going to go into something very conservative like bonds, you might not get the same return you're getting on that inflation is causing your spending. Getting something like this, to get a 7.5% return, even when the market's down, is quite good. So it's very important to mix these in to your investment profile. So the last one I like to go into is called a dual direction segment, right? So this is a little bit combination of the other, of the other segments. This one still has the buffer. This buffer is still at 15%. But what it does is it's not a step up. It's the absolute value of the return of the index. So you could see here, if you think about it as the standard, the market's up 4%, 5%, you're up 4%, 5%, and it maxes out at the cap. So this particular one has a 9% cap. And on the downside, you also have appreciation up until the cap, which the market's down 4%, you're earning 4%. So you can see a massive overperformance in this area. And then the buffer kicks in and you get protection until then, and you'll do much better than holding the index outright. So, that's it's all right investment as well. Obviously, mixing and matching these things is fantastic, because we're going to look at this sample portfolio I've put together, and I've just put two of them. We have that standard segment, which you have a participation for on until the cap on the top side, with the dual step up with the 70%, 30% weighting, and we're looking at the blue line, right? And these are the same rates that we had, or the same terms and conditions we had on the other one. 16% cap on the standard segment, 7.5% cap on the dual step up. The buffers are 10 and 15 respectively. So you could see that when we look at this blue line, we're still getting a positive return almost all the way down to 13% of a loss, right? And this positive return here between 0 and 10 is 2.25%. So when we look at that and we talk about that, you want to make something at least that compares to inflation. Well, that's going to give you that nice return. And then you're really looking at something that's on the downside, you're going to lose 11% less than what the overall index is once you get down to the minus 15%, right? So that's fantastic. And then on the top side, you're not giving away a hell of a lot. You look at that blue line crests at about, I believe, 13 and a quarter. So 13 and a quarter is certainly something substantial that you can't really be upset about if you're hitting that cap every year, especially when you look at where am I going to lose money? You're going to start losing money on negative 13, negative 15% of return. So blending these strategies is very, very important. So thank you very much. Sorry, this was a long one, but I hope you found it very valuable. This is a fantastic product. Again, our mission is to educate, engage, and empower you to make informed decisions that align with your retirement goals and your objectives. And we love our stuff. We're so grateful for it. So please, subscribers, thumbs up, supporters, followers, and friends, we love you. Thank you very much, everyone. Here are the disclaimers, and have yourself a very, very lovely day. Take care.